So this is the video on the last section of this unit where we are talking about circles and the various lines that are inside and outside circles. So the first thing I want to do is see if I can remind you guys back on how we find the distance between 2 points. Now, this formula is on your formula sheet. If you guys have your formula sheet, go ahead and look at it. Look for it and see if you can find it. And this is what it is. So if you remember, we have these points x2, y2, x1, y1, and x2, y2. Now, I always tell my students to do this. Go ahead and label these x1, y1, and x2 and y2, because then plugging it into the formula is pretty easy. So once we do that, we're going to put those points in. Remember, we're subtracting, so we've got our x2, that's our -2, and we're subtracting the 2 from it. Notice the subtraction sign right there. We're going to square that then. And then we're going to add to it our y2, which is 4 here. And we're going to subtract 2 from it as well. And then we're going to square that. So we get -2 minus 2, that's a -4. Here it's 4 minus 2, which will be 2. So when we square any number, it becomes positive. So that's going to end up being 16 plus 4. And when we take the square root of that, we get square root of 20. And that's either 2 radical 5, because the square root of 20 is the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. And the square root of 4 is 2 right here. Or if we put in our calculator, we get 4.47. So our objectives in this lesson are that we can write equations and graph circles in coordinate plane, and that we can use equations and graph of a circle to solve problems. So the first thing I want to talk to you about right here is how did we get the equation? Now, on your formula sheet, you're going to find a formula for a circle. The distance formula was the first formula over on the left-hand column of your formula sheet, whereas the equation of a circle is over there on the right underneath the Pythagorean theorem and the trigonometric relationships. So we're going to talk about how did we derive that equation. So the first thing I want you to notice here is that we do have 2 points. We have a center here, and we have a point on the circle. And those are the points that we're actually going to use to derive the equation. Now, again, we can find the distance between the center of the circle and any point on the circle, and we would call that the radius. We can find that distance using the distance formula. So the distance formula would tell us that x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Again, this could be, this point up here could be x1, y1, and this could be x2, y2. And so, or vice versa. So when we do this problem and we go ahead and swap these, then we're going to have x and y, and we're going to have h and k. Now, h and k are the center of the circle, and that's really important that y'all remember that h is the x value of the center of the circle, and k is the y value of the center of the circle. Now, when we're trying to get rid of this, we would square both sides of this. If we're trying to get rid of the square root, that would give us r squared down here, and then x minus h squared plus y minus k squared. So that's how you derive the equation for a circle. That's how it was derived originally, and that's what we're going to use. Again, it's on your formula sheet. So what you really have to remember is that h and k are the center, and r is the radius. The x and y values you may or may not be given. Now, most equations for circles have x and y in them. So we're going to talk through that too as we work through these problems. So this says write the equation of each circle. Circle J with a center of J, which is 2.2, and a radius of 4. So our formula again for equation of a circle is x minus h squared y minus k squared equals r squared. So we're going to go up here and look and see what we have. So this says that this is the center. That means this is my h and this is my k, because again, it's my center. And it says our radius is 4, so we know that that's going to be, that 4 is going to be equal to r. So now all we're going to do is plug those values into the equation. And when we do that, we get x minus 2 squared plus y minus 2 squared. Remember, the equation has a minus in it, equals 4 squared. So if we simplify that, really the only part of this that we're going to simplify any more than it already is the 4 squared, and that's going to be 16. Because again, when equations are written like this, we know that 2 and 2 are the center of the circle. If we take the square root of 16, that is our radius. Okay, so now let's do this another time. So again, it says this time circle K that passes through J, which is 6, 4, and has a center of K, which is 1, negative 8. This time we don't have the radius. So we got to figure out what of these are. X, Y, H, K, J, or an R. Okay, so this is the circle K passes through the point J, which is 6, 4. So this is going to be our X, and this is going to be our Y. And it has a center of 1, negative 8. So this is going to be our H, and this is going to be our K. Now again, we just write our formula and we just fill it in. Now, when we're doing this, you can write it exactly the way it is there on your paper. Just realize that when we're trying to find R, we're going to have to take, with our original formula, we had R squared is X minus H squared plus Y minus K squared. If we take the square root of R squared, we get R. So if we take the square root of this, we're going to get our radius. So we're going to do, again, plug our values in. This is our X and our H. This is our Y and our K. Remember, if we got a minus, we still put it in the problem because minus a minus will end up being a plus. So that's going to end us giving us 5 squared here. This is going to end up giving us 12 squared. So let's talk about that. So this would be 5 squared plus 12 squared. So that's equal to 25 plus 144. Well, that's 169. So our next step would be to take the square root of 169. So that is our radius. So 13 is our radius. And then we're going to plug back just our H and K and our R into the equation for a circle. So we got to plug it back into the equation. So we got our H here, which we were given right there. We've got our K here, which we were given right there. And then we've got our 13, and we're going to square it this time. So we can't simplify the X minus 1 squared at all, but we can simplify this because we have a minus and a minus here. So that's going to end up being Y plus 8. And then we're going to square the 13, which was going to give us 169. So here again, this is our center is going to be 1, negative 8, because if it's positive, it means that this term was a negative. And then we're going to take the square root of the 169 to find out what our radius is. One more here. It says write the equation of a circle. Actually, 2 more, I should say. So go ahead and do these check it outs and then come back to me when you're done. So here again, we have the center. This is going to be H. This is going to be K. And we have our radius, which is our R. Plug these into the equation, and you should be able to tell me the equation for the circle. So our H, so it's going to be X minus 0, Y minus a minus 3, which will end up being Y plus 3, and then 8 squared. That's what we're going to do here. So this will just end up being X squared. This will be Y plus 3, and this will be 64. So then we have our equation for our circle. Okay, do the next one and then come back to me when you're done. So let's write the equation of each circle, this time that passes through a point, 2, 3, and has a center. So this again is going to be our X and our Y, and this is going to be our H and our K, and we're going to have to find our radius this time to be able to write the equation for the circle. So we're going to plug these again into our formula. So here's our X and our H. This is our Y and our K. Recall again that 2 minus 2 is 0. This would be 3 plus 1. So that's going to end up being 0 squared plus 4 squared. And 4 squared is 16. So we're going to take the square root of 16 and find out that our radius is 4. Again, we got to remember for our next part that our formula is X minus H squared plus Y minus K squared equals R squared. So we're going to do Y minus X minus H, there's our H, Y minus K, so it's minus a minus 1, plug it into the equation first and then simplify it. And then we're going to square this 4, so that's going to be 16. So this is going to end up being X minus 2 squared plus Y plus 1, again, because we got a minus. And then we're going to square that 16. So again, we can pull our center right from here. 2, negative 1 is our center, and if we take the square root of 16, that's our radius. Great way to check your problem. All right, so the next one says if you're given the equation of a circle, you can graph the circle by making a table or by identifying its center and its radius. So on this one, we have a graph here. So the first thing I want to ask is what is the center of this circle? And if you'll notice, it's labeled right here. So we have that the center is negative 1, 2. So we're going to go ahead and write our equation for a circle again. The other thing that we have to determine is what is the radius. So all I do to make sure I get the radius correct is I literally count from the center to the circle because that's the radius. So if I do that, that's 1, 2, 3. And if I'm not sure, I can go any direction from that center. 1, 2, 3, or even down here, 1, 2, 3, or over here, 1, 2, 3. Irregardless of which direction I go, I know that my R is going to be 3. So the ordered pair for the center is -1, 2. The radius is 3. Now all we have to do is plug these in here. So this again, this -1 is our H. This 2 is going to be our K. This 3 is going to be our R. So we plug them back into the equation. And we get x minus a minus 1. We know that that's going to end up being +1. Y minus 2, because there's our K, and then 3 squared. So our equation for the circle is going to be x plus 1 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 9. So now I want you to go ahead and do this, check it out, and then come back to me. So here again, this time we don't have the center marked in this drawing, so we got to figure out where it is. This is a little bit more challenging, but what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to take a guess. So this kind of looks to me like it should be the center of the circle. So what I'm going to do is kind of count right, left, up, and down and see if it is. Because if I get the same distance when I go right, left, up, and down, then it is the center. So here I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I count over here, if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, or if I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, or I go left 1, 2, 3, 4, down 1, 2, 3, 4. So yes, that's my center. So then I got to figure out what point that is. And I know that that point is -1, 1, because it's 1 to the left and 1 up. So once I find that center, then I can use it to go ahead and write the ordered pair for the center. That's -1, 1. Then we already found the radius. It was 4. So now all we're doing is plugging those values of H and K. That's what this is. This is H here, and this is K here, and then our R into the equation. So when we do that, this is what we get. Again, minus a minus 1 is going to be a +1. This -1 is going to stay a -1 because it was positive when we put it in there, and then 4 squared. So here again, we know that this is going to be -1, 1 for our center, and this is going to be the square root of 16, which is going to be 4. All right, so here's our third example. This time we're going to do completing the square to find the center and the radius. Now I want to talk y'all through this problem. Now when we do these types of problems, we're going to move all the x values into one set of parentheses, and we're going to move all the y values into another set of parentheses, and we're going to move our constant to the other side of the equal sign. So notice here that we have, sorry, where's my mouse? There it is. We have an x squared here, and we have a -2x here. So we're going to group those. And then we have a y squared here and a 4y here, so we're going to group those. And we're also going to move that 1 to the other side of the equal sign. So that's what I did. So I grouped the x squared minus the 2x in one set of parentheses. I did the y squared plus 4y in another set of parentheses. And I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides to move it to the other side. So now my next step is going to be to take half of this. Half of this, if y'all remember, we were doing the completing the square. We did that in the first unit, in the first section, part 2. So we're going to divide this to -2 by 2. That's going to give me -1. Over here, we're going to divide the 4 by 2. And remember, multiplying by 1/2 and dividing by 2 are the same thing. So if we take half of -2, that's -1. We're going to put that number in a set of parentheses. Here, half of 4 is going to be 2. So we're going to do that right here. That's the number, this number 1 that we're going to put in parentheses. So that's going to be our 1, and we're going to put that in parentheses, the parenthesis there. And this is going to be our 4. Now, if you recall, we talked about what does this mean? If we were to factor this, what would it factor to be? And this is what we call a perfect square trinomial. And this is what we call a perfect square trinomial. So once again, we are completing the square. Now remember, if we add a 1 over here, then we have to add a 1 over here. And if we add a 4 on the left of the equal sign, then we have to add a 4 on the right of the equal sign. So now we're going to factor this. If we factor x squared minus 2x, what we're going to put in the parenthesis is this -1. So we're going to say x minus 1 squared, and we're going to put this 2 here that we got, again, when we divided by 2 up here, we got a 2. So we're going to put that in the parentheses down here, and we're going to square that. And then we're just going to add up what we had over here on the right. So negative 1 plus 1 obviously is 0 and the 4. So now we can tell what our center is and what our radius is. And as we've done before, the center here is going to be 1, negative 2. Remember again that there's minus signs here in our standard formula. And then this is the square root of 4, which would be 2. So our center here is going to be 1, negative 2, and our radius is going to be 2. Okay, so I want you guys to go ahead and do this, check it out example, and then come back to me. All right, so on this one, again, we're going to group our x's, which will be x squared and negative 6x, and we're going to group our y's, y squared and negative 4y. We're going to move this 4 to the other side of the equal sign. So we're going to do all that first. So again, we're going to take half of this negative 6, that would be negative 3. So that's going to be x minus 3 squared. But remember, we're also going to square that. So that negative 3 that we get here, we're going to square it, and we're going to put it right back up in here. Here, we're going to divide the negative 4 by 2. That gives us y minus 2 squared. Again, we're going to take that negative 2 and square it. Anything squared is a positive number, so negative 2 squared is 4 here. So that's our next step. So we get negative 3 squared here. We get negative 2 squared there. And remember, negative 3 squared is 9, so we got to add that 9 to the right side. Negative 2 squared is 4, so we got to add that 4 to the right side over here. Then we're going to simplify because, again, we're going to take this number, this negative 3, and we're going to do x minus 3 squared. We're going to take this minus 2 right here, and we're going to put it right here. So it's y minus 2 squared. And then we're going to take this 9 because, again, we got minus 4 here and 4. So those two cancel each other out, so we're only left with a 9. So the center here again, this time we can pull them straight exactly the way they are because we got minus signs. So we know that the h in this formula is a 3. The k in this formula is a 2. So our center is going to be 3, 2. And we're going to take the square root of the 9 to get 3 for our radius. So our center is going to be 3, 2, and our radius is going to be 3. All right, so the last example that we're going to do here is identifying if a point is on a circle. So this asks us, does the point negative 1, 3 lie on the circle centered at 1, 3 and going through point 1, 1? So the very first thing we have to do here is, again, see if these 2 points, what is the equation for these 2 points of a circle. So that's going to be my x and my y. So we're going to do what we did before, and we're going to populate our formula for a circle here with h, k, x, and y. We're going to simplify it. So 0 squared is 0. Negative 2 squared is 4. So then we're going to take the square root of 4, if you notice here, and that's going to be 2. So our radius is going to be 2. But this is going to be our equation. Again, we got our h here, which is our negative 1 here. We got our k there. That goes down there. And then we're going to put our r squared over here on the right. So now the question was, does the point negative 1, 3 lie on the circle centered at 1, 3 and going through the point 1, 1? So what we need to do now is test this point. So we're going to put it back in this equation. So it's going to end up being minus 1, minus 1, and it's going to end up being 3 minus 3. So when we do that, and we plug it back into the equation, that point, we get here minus 1 minus a 1 is minus 2. When we square that, that's going to end up being 4. 3 minus 3 is 0. So we square 0, we get 0. So this is going to end up being 4 equals 4. So the answer to this question is yes, that point negative 1, 3 lies on the circle. So what we had to do first, though, was find the equation for the circle. So don't forget that. So the answer again is yes, that point does lie on the circle. All right, so do this one and then come back to me. And remember, you got to find the equation for the circle first. All right, so on this one again, we've got h and k right here. H is 4, k is negative 2. The point on the circle, x and y. Negative 1 is x, 2 is y. So we got h, k, x, and y. Plug them into the formula. Negative 1 minus 4 is negative 5. Negative 2 minus a minus 2, that would be negative 2 plus 2. So this is going to end up being negative 5 here. This is going to end up being 0 here. So negative 5 squared, again, remember, anything squared is going to be a positive number. So that's going to end up being 25. So r squared is 25. Now remember, in our formula, we always have r squared over here, so we can actually go ahead and just stick that number over here. If you want to take the square root of it and get 5 and then square it again to put it in there, that's fine too. So again, we're going to take our h up here, center h, 4. We're going to take our k from up here, negative 2. Remember, minus a minus 2 is a plus 2. And we're going to set that equal to our 25. And the point we're testing now is 3, 4. So we're going to put 3 in here for x and 4 in here for y. So when we do that, we get 3 minus 4, that's 1. Actually, a negative 1. We're going to square that. And then we got 4 plus 2, which is 6. So that's going to be 1, because negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. It's going to be 36. That's going to end up being 37. 37 does not equal 25. So this time, 3, 4, it just says, does 3, 4 lie on the circle? And the answer is no, because when we put that point back in the equation, it does not work.